Hello in the broadcast, the program Time. During the last days, our editorial office was kept in a state of tension. The film crew of the program Time found itself surrounded at the Tajik-Afghan border. However, fortunately today, they made contact and managed to report to us from the combat site. For 2 days, our film crew was in the center of the tragic events, which unfolded on the first border outpost of the Harok Border Regiment, surrounded from all sides by a gang of irreconcilable Tajik opposition. The outpost, manned by only 50 people, deflected attacks of the Hawks. This is how the border troops named the gunmen and foreign mercenaries with them. For 3 days, the outpost was unsupported and roads leading toward it were blown up. Inclement weather did not allow aviation to come to assist. Today, we have a possibility to help the outpost by directly moving in combat technology. They need delivery of ammunition and food. The injured and dead must be removed. I would like our operation to be successful. The operation was successful. When at the border outpost, a little more than 30 were left, the landing of a paratrooper storming group was accomplished successfully. To deliver food, ammunition, and military aviation began to clear nearby precipices of gang formations. Today in Dushanbe, again they said farewell to border troops who died in combat in Gorny Badakhshan. During the last 6 days alone, the border troops lost 35 of their comrades. According to military intelligence, among the adversary ranks there are 200 gunmen missing. Clashes on mountainous stretches of the Tajik-Afghan border continue. By evening, Intertas reported that on the Pamir stretch of the Tajik-Afghan border, there is one more hot point subjected to shelling from grenade launchers was the border post Bachit of the Harok Border Regiment in close proximity to Harok. Interfax reported that there are casualties among the Russian border troops. Meanwhile, the delegation of official Dushanbe flew on a peacekeeping mission to Gorny Badakhshan district. This delegation was formed on the instructions of the president of Tajikistan. And today, during the day, it was learned that vacationing in Sochi, the President Yeltsin met with the head of the Federal Border Service of Russia. By evening, details were learned of that meeting. It was completely dedicated to the state of affairs on the border. The President gave an entire series of instructions to government and also feels it's indispensable to increase coordination of efforts of the CIS countries with international organizations. And now about battles on the political arena. The situation intensified seriously in two parliaments simultaneously, Ukrainian and Belarusian. Analysts had predicted a political crisis in Belarus, but evidently the course of events were flowing quite peacefully. From political turmoil which erupted in the Belarusian parliament in the last few days, today not a trace is left. The opposition did not even make a reminder of them, which became the center of conflict. It simply was absent in the auditorium. The remainder of the deputies decided the last plenary session they would conduct in full accord amongst themselves and with the president. It seems Alexander Lukashenko was in solidarity with them. I regret very much that we didn't always have such an atmosphere, but we could have easily worked this way. And now there probably will be someone who will say that some pressure was exerted on the deputies. No, because today indicated that the president and the deputies are working in the interests of this country. There will be no other type of government, and today I understood what a mistake we allowed and permitted in the 7 months of our work. We always needed to develop agreement together. On the last parliamentary day, the deputies ratified a major agreement on friendship and cooperation, which was signed in February by the presidents of Belarus and Russia, and also the Russian-Belarusian agreement, including one regarding a customs agreement and union, after which positive results were achieved in the voting on the national referendum to be held the 14th of May on election day on all 4 questions initiated by the president. With a sense of a duty fulfilled, the deputy corps of Belarus was photographed with the president for posterity. The deputies also decided to declare the 7th of November, the day of the October Revolution, a national holiday. Today it was learned that the realization of the agreement is beginning on restructuring the Ukrainian debt to Russia. This was announced by the first Vice Premier Alexis Kavets. According to him, Ukraine this year will have to pay out to Russia $600 million. Today, the first 50 million were transferred. Possibly this is a certain new level in the relations between the two countries. Meanwhile, the left faction of Ukrainian parliament cancelled the beginning of the morning plenary session today. The Ukrainian parliament today convened its session with a 3-hour delay. There was no quorum because the left factions refused to register. What regards the law on rule, it was decided to continue its article-by-article discussion, but not ratify nor put into effect finally until adoption of corresponding amendments to the Constitution or holding a general national referendum on contentious matters, with the natural desire of the President to as quickly as possible acquire the legal levers of controlling the situation in the country. Such a delay creates problems. Evidently, that is why Leonid Kuchma invited today to the administration of the President for discussion all deputies interested in adopting a law on rule. By overwhelming majority of votes, the address of the Supreme Soviet of Ukraine to the State Duma of Russia was adopted. In it, there is expressed concern over actions of some of the Russian deputies concerning the Crimean matter. The Duma, including into the agenda the question on the legality of conveying Sevastopol to Ukraine, adopting a moratorium on one-sided reduction of the Black Sea Fleet, and extending an invitation to speak at Russian Parliament to the Crimean Speaker Sergei Tsakhov. The address is concluded with a request to Russian legislators to completely refrain from encroachment on Ukrainian statehood. The statement evidently is connected also with yesterday's arrival of the chairman of the Committee of the Russian Duma on CIS Affairs, Konstantin Zatulin, to Kiev, where he was firmly given to understand that they did not intend to discuss the Crimean issue with Russia. And the chairman of the Supreme Soviet of Crimea, Sergei Tsakhov, is attempting to be assured of the support of Russian politicians. He's in Moscow and is meeting with many politicians. According to Interfax, the president of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, gave his consent after his return from his vacation to hold consultations with representatives of factions and deputy groups of the State Duma on the question of mutual relations with Ukraine. This is all for now, but the situation in Crimea, now Chechnya. Today in Chechnya, again there is combat, according to military sources, regarding the launched operation of federal forces to gain control of one more stronghold, Bamut, however, at 1600 hours as of today. Correspondents had no knowledge of the status of the operation. Our film crew was in another region altogether. Several massive and well-armed groups of Dudaev, which were squeezed out of Gudermes 2 weeks ago, occupied defense positions on the mountain slopes to the south and southeast of that city. Currently, the federal forces have locked the blockade ring around the mountain terrain occupied by the gunmen. Despite the significant amounts of combat technology and heavy weapons at the disposal of Dudaev formations, and this is indicated by the massive firing at the federal forces, an attempt to penetrate the blockade ring is doomed to fail. The command of the federal forces noted that the armed groups, in order to avoid unnecessary casualties, were offered to lay down their weapons and surrender. Otherwise, in the next few days, an operation will be launched to annihilate the gunmen. From here to the Dagestani border is only 25 kilometers, but considering the fact that the peaceful residents are not permitting armed Dudaev supporters into their villages, the latter have no place to go. Possibly for some time they will attempt to hold out in the regional center Vedino. However, the experience of delivering Shili and Gudermes from gunmen permits the hope that losses and destruction may be avoided. The injured continue to be delivered from Chechnya, and physicians from the St. Petersburg clinic continue to work miracles. They extract bullets from hearts. A very serious operation was performed on Anatoly Lumar, who received a bullet in the heart, and this was in the area of Samashki. In the X-ray images, you can see how pulsating together with the heart is the lethal 9 grams. Specialists of the Military Medical Academy of St. Petersburg, where the injured was taken, faced a very unique operation. For several hours, the military surgeons, headed by the director of the academy, the famous cardiovascular surgeon Yuri Savchenko, fought for the soldier's life. They had to not only remove the bullet, but force the wounded heart to beat. And although this case is the most serious, it unfortunately is not an isolated one. From the first days of the Chechen tragedy, the academy took into its surgery wing more than 200 injured, who, according to many medical canons, were considered to be hopeless. The doctors found themselves helpless only in 4 cases. Incidentally, this time the operation to remove the bullet from the soldier's heart was brilliantly performed by the senior lieutenant, but already a candidate of sciences, Ivan Chiripanin, a talented student of Professor Shevchenko. In the school, we managed to preserve everything and hand over through inheritance to generations but we have much more demanding work. We managed to make telephone contact with the Military Medical Academy. We were told that the condition of Anatoly Lomar is as expected for the sustained operation. Physicians describe it as a satisfactory. The information programs already reported what happened in the village Samashki. Today a press conference was held by human rights defenders. A group of human rights defenders of Sergei Kovalov and several deputies of the State Duma expounded today their version of the operation in seizing Samashki by federal forces. They said that the Dudaev gunmen never executed elders, and in general all gunmen were expelled from the village prior to the Ministry of Internal Affairs units arriving in the village. Sergei Kovalov refuted official announcements that Samashki was taken without blood. In the opinion of observers, in Samashki there are many casualties among the peaceful population. Rights defenders, citing exclusively eyewitness accounts, say that from the 7th of April for 3 days, Ministry of Internal Affairs squads robbed and murdered people. Therefore, in the village, there's extensive damage and casualties. As proof, the journalists represented one of the residents of Samashki. He returned, took something off, threw it. It was a grenade, and it rolled onto the place where I was sitting. The grenade blew up, but I wasn't injured. The human rights defenders distributed the statement of the elders of Samashki, where atrocities committed by federal forces are described. It says, I quote, "The village of Samashki no longer exists. Instead, mounds of ashes and bodies of women and elderly. We can't verify the information about the bloodless taking of the village, nor can we confirm mass murders, looting, and violence by federal forces. Neither journalists, deputies, nor doctors were permitted to pass through the block posts for several days. You see films shot from the helicopter by our correspondent Mikhail Zotov. They permit one to judge how Samashki looks today." Today, the Federative Council of Russia, after turbulent discussion and revote, decided to send to the Constitutional Court a petition on the correlation of the Constitution with the decree of the President regarding, and the resolution of government regarding the situation in Chechnya. It seems the members of the upper chamber of Russian Parliament were convinced firmly of the saying that morning is wiser than evening. For 2 days, they have been cancelling an evening session. Incidentally, everything in its order. This morning, at the morning session, a petition to the Constitutional Court was prepared regarding the operation in Chechnya. The Chamber asks to confirm the lawfulness of deployment of the army in this Russian Republic. In essence, without discussion, the Federative Council adopted several economic laws, including one regulating banks and bank operations, declining, not for the first time, the law regarding the central bank. To establish a minimum salary starting the 1st of April at 34,400 rubles per month, and from the 1st of May, 43,700 rubles. This norm is contained in the law on increasing minimum compensation for labor. The minimum old-aged pension as of the 1st of May will be 43,739 rubles. Adopted for review, but deferred until the next meeting, is the law regarding public Russian television. And now about what happened in the evening. Yet again, the auditorium of the sessions of the chamber was half empty, although in the agenda there were such global issues as the election of the President of Russia and Parliament, and how, where, and how long would service in the army be required, and other prominent matters. What can one say? The Parliament is always a copy of the society. On the instructions of Vladimir Shumeka, it was decided to send telegrams to the deputies so that tomorrow they would appear for the chamber's session, and perhaps, indeed, the morning will be wiser than the evening. The government will soon have to choose to execute the law on the budget or those laws which are in contravention to it. This was stated by the aide of the President, Alexander Lifshitz. Hence, he commented on the last decision of the Parliament. Lifshitz suggests that the deputies vote for a law banishing the adoption of any laws for the financing of which in the budget of 1995 there is no money. The principle is simple. If you really want it but can't afford it, you shouldn't, he said. The government, however, today summarized results of yesterday's pan-Russian active protest. According to the number of participants, the government figures and the figures of the Federation of Independent Unions are divergent. Viktor Yedin stated that there were 450,000 participants. The other side feels that there were approximately 3 times more. In any case, the demands resounded loudly. How did the government react to this active protest? Is it in control of the situation? And what does it intend to do today to partially, if not fully, alleviate some of the tension in society? Evidently, the answers to all these questions are positive. At least this morning, the government did not look to be at a loss, but on the contrary, quite confident and diverging from the usual agenda, dedicated an entire hour of its work to adopting decisions on yesterday's situation. Issuing a report on this matter, Anatoly Chubayev stated that the extremely tense situation in the defense sector was diffused. Money has begun to be received yesterday by companies and today as well, and literally tomorrow the companies of the defense sector will receive the basic bulk of financing for salaries. In the opinion of Chubayev, helping to alleviate tension were dialogues of the government, which he personally conducted with the leadership of the unions. Another meeting with the leaders of the unions is planned for the end of April. The other most intense sphere is the social sphere, and foremost, these are the teachers and stipends. Delays in salaries to teachers were not connected at all with the federal budget. The federal budget has no further obligations to the teachers on payments. These obligations were fulfilled. However, in the opinion of the government, the problem remains, and it is most severe. And in this connection, the government unanimously adopted a decision on additional financing of salaries to teachers from the federal budget to the tune of 85 billion rubles. This decision will begin to be implemented as of today. At that same meeting, the Minister of Finances, Panskov, stated that there are no longer any reserve funds in the budget, yet payment to coal miners continue, and the strike has ended. The strike since morning was stopped by the collectors of the mines of the city Artyomov, the villages Lipovtsev and Tuvrichanka. Payments to them have begun to be extended from the tariff agreement. Salary finally arrived in Partizansk, the same 50 billion rubles which were brought to Primoria by the Minister of Fuel and Energy, Yuri Shafranik. Therefore, today, at the mines of the city, preparations for underground work have begun. Gas is being aired out of the shafts. Emergency repairs, because during the period of forced stoppage, the equipment has come into disrepair and even break down completely. And tomorrow, all 5 mines of Partizansk will begin procuring coal. Incidentally, not waiting for the government's mercy, Primorian miners set up an aid fund for workers who participated in the hunger strike. The Rim authorities intend to exclude Primorsk Ugl from compensation for land use and issue new territories for the development of prospective smaller coal strata and beds. The current leadership of the joint stock company Primorsk Ugl, or Primorian Coal, deny their involvement in multi-billion ruble machinations with government funds intended to support miners of Primoria. This was stated in an open letter from the directors of the joint stock company Primorsk Coal and the Territorial Commission of the Union of the Workers of the Coal Sector to all miners and collectives of the Far East. Where the money was circulating, this question evidently remains open. Since April in Russia, the second level of privatization begins. It begins realistically. That is, shares will be broadly sold of privatized companies at monetary auctions and tenders or competitions. This was announced by the chairman of the State Committee of Property, Sergei Bilayev, at today's press conference. After the completion of Czech privatization, this at one time hot topic left the front pages of newspapers, television programs and magazines only periodically, drawing the attention of journalists. Not attempting to fully recap the entire story, I must point out one fact. The portion of the non-state sector in the economy is significantly beyond the 50% mark. The yield from privatization, its tangible results, are probably the main subject of analysis of late. It's most visible in the sphere of service and trade. These same old stores, now with new owners, have changed their images beyond recognition. At the same time, Czech privatization did not and could not resolve all the problems, especially those of foremost concern today. Realizing revenues from privatization, the attraction of investments, real money for companies. These objectives are in the second phase, the phase of monetary privatization, the beginning of which was announced today in Moscow by the chairman of the State Committee of Property, Sergei Bilayev. Private investors are offered state packages of shares of 7,186 companies in various regions of the country. Later, it's planned to supplement that list with companies of a general national level. The revenues from the sales to the budget, according to preliminary calculations, will be more than 9 trillion rubles. The second level of privatization takes on an even more social direction focus than the first. This indicates that if we achieve the objective which is provided in the budget law, that means many social problems will be resolved. The second objective is also understood by all, that is, to fill privately owned companies with investment. At the same time, a cardinal breakthrough in attracting, let's say, private investments from abroad has not occurred. Foreign investors have acquired little less than 10% of the shares of privatized companies. This figure was cited at the press conference, which is catastrophically little. Sergei Bilaev did not exclude that one may expect activity towards summer with the decrease in the tempos of inflation and overall stabilization in the economy of Russia. The State Committee of Property has very precisely determined that the company Aeroflot Russian International Airline remains the only national carrier. The question, will this resolve existing conflicts and will it make our transportation easier, remains. It's not the first time that on the verge of catastrophe was our largest airline, Aeroflot Russian International Airline, but not in the air, on the ground. And although emergency situations were averted several times, since the protest action wasn't supported by the pilots themselves, on behalf of whom the leadership of the flight crew union had submitted various demands. But the conflict with the board of directors continues, and peace is long overdue because the document received from the State Committee of Property removes the basic demands from the agenda, and the directors themselves have sent documents to the Prosecutor General with ostensible cases of financial violations. And now of the demands, only secondary ones remain, for example, the replacement of the directors. And yet the appeal to protest remains, and if it does take place, the damage will be extensive. And all of this could remain an internal matter of the company, but Aeroflot, the Russian international airline, through a new document of the State Committee of Property, was defined as the sole national carrier of 300 companies. Hence, any emergency situation could cause losses not just to the state, but casts a shadow on the performance of the government, which holds 51% of the shares. Luckily, this confrontation is not noticeable for passengers because the struggle is conducted not in the air but on ground and basically at meetings and through proclamations. But the urge to launch a hunger strike remains only an admonition, and as we were told from Sheremetyevo, the action planned for tomorrow won't reflect on flights. The directors of the union, and in the past these were experienced pilots and board personnel who precisely paved the routes in the air, now possibly are mistakenly laying routes on the ground. The Minister of Defense Pavel Grachev is traveling throughout Russia from one unit of missile forces of strategic designation to another, attempting to resolve problems on location. Meanwhile, in the Ministry of Defense, again an emergency situation. In one of the units in Samara, 6 tanks have burst into flames and ammunition blown up. 1 person died, 10 are in hospital with injuries of varying degrees. The military prosecutor will have to investigate the causes. Nor are the causes known yet of the major fire in Moscow, which occurred last night, although specialists feel that this is probably not intentional act of arson. In the morning, our film crew was on the site of the occurrence. Yesterday's fire in Promstroy Bank officially ended today at 7 p.m. The last firefighting vehicle left the scene. There's much speculation regarding the fire. They say also all documents on private deposits have burned. The situation is commented on by the first deputy director of the bank, Stanislav Tetirov. All the documentation, which is extremely important, the shareholders and depositors and clients' documentation on information and balances of their accounts is intact. What regards private depositors, that is, today that's always a problem, we would like to avail ourselves of this interview and again assure them on behalf of the directors that their funds are completely intact. And as always in these cases, a rumor circulated that the fire was not accidental, it was a case of arson. This is not refuted by the directors of the bank. We have to think through this very carefully, attentively, and analyze. That means you suspect that it was a case of arson? No, I said I have doubt that the fire could be caused only by trivial reasons. And again, politics. Today, the head of the administration of the President of Russia, Sergei Filatov, said that rumors about the cancellation or postponement of the schedules of the elections of Parliament and President were aimed at destabilizing the situation in the country. At the same time, he noted that the democratically oriented parties and movements must unite. In the Central Asian republics, a definite course has been set out through referendums. Confidence is expressed in the president, and the term is extended to the year 2000. Today on this topic, the report from Kazakhstan. On the eve of the general referendum to extend to the year 2000 the powers of the President Nazarbayev, many naturally ask the question, why a referendum and not, let's say, elections of a new Supreme Soviet? The Central Election Commission on this matter clarifies that an electoral marathon would force the President to be distracted from reforms, and this is not lucrative from the economic or political points of view. Nazarbayev, however, answers simply. He needs to be assured of support of the people in the correction of the course of reform. $4+ million is the cost of reform, but an election could cost far more. In Kazakhstan, also, there are no serious political forces with leaders of merit who could provide a choice, and dilettantes in politics and the economy could cause damage using the heat of passions for selfish gain. Grandiose festivities with the participation of the presidents of several countries, diplomats, and international ethnic and cultural communities will be held in August. And now, in the Republic, preparations for the anniversary are being pursued of the great revelation of the leader of the nation, Manasa, who united warring tribes to create a strong Kyrgyzstan state. One of the main centers of celebrations will be the small town Salas. It's famous because in its suburbs, this Gumbes Manasa was preserved, that is, the tomb and mausoleum. Recently, the Manasan Declaration was adopted with an exhortation to the people to preserve unity and decisively foil attempts of those who, I quote, drag out of the past the antiquated banners of tribalism and clan behavior, who in word and deed cause harm to international accord. Signing the declaration, Askar Akayev, the writer Chingiz Altimatov, the former leader of the Communist Party of Kyrgyzstan, Turbakov Vasiliev, and other respected dignitaries in the Republic took an oath before the sacred spirit of Manasa to forgive each other old transgressions. The public opinion is sincerely preparing to extend the term of the powers of the President Askar Akayev, who is seemingly continuing Manasa's work. It's known that more than 60 national deputies of 92 elected have signed a letter in this regard. I continue the program time. In the beginning of May, Europe will celebrate the 50th anniversary of the end of the Second World War, the most terrible war in all human history. There is awareness of the programs of celebrations in all European capitals. They will begin in London, where, as well, just as in Moscow, they expect the arrival of dignitaries from between 50 to 60 countries, and we continue to follow the chronology of events of the year 1945. On this day, exactly 50 years ago, our forces liberated Vienna. In the battle for the fortress in the south, as the Nazis called the Austrian capital, artillery, infantry, and tanks of the 3rd and 4th Ukrainian fronts were supported by pilots of the 17th and 5th Air Army and also the Marine paratroopers of the Danube Flotilla. Retreating, the SS received orders from Berlin to blow up in the city and in its fringes, bridges, communications, and food stockpiles. After the liberation, our engineering units restored 45 railway bridges alone. In the same victory year, the liberator country sent to Austria many tons of food. Half a century later, the memory and gratitude of Austrians for that feat is expressed in more than words in the caring attention to the monuments and soldiers' burial grounds, and such in the country are more than 200. Today, the 13th of April, 1995, for the program time, for the first time, the true number of our soldiers and officers buried on the territory of Austria was revealed: 86,868. For many years, not extinguished in veterans' hearts is the memory of friends, comrade friends, those who went together into the attack and who shared bitter bread of war. Soldiers in the dugouts for 2 weeks through torrential rains, wet and exhausted, without any sleep whatsoever, and the lieutenant awakens them every hour, 5 to 6 times at a row, and screaming, ahead, ahead. That was the path to Berlin. Young then, the lieutenant from Odessa, who learned the war in its first days, who later became a Siberian and famous artist, Ostap Shrup dedicated many paintings to the war and its heroes. He also, a commander of the artillery company, after 4 serious injuries each time, returned to the front and miraculously survived. One of the thousands in the regiments which had to begin the war. They don't know about our victory. They still don't know anything. But we were the first to deal the blow to the fascist fanaticism. We said to them that they won't pass so easily. It's not so easy to break Russia. Much emotional energy was taken during the spring days on the eve of the anniversary of the great victory from the two men, artist and front soldier, by his requiem. His pain for the field and comrades, soldiers and fellows. His pursued dream today is to create an international altar of eternal memory to the defenders of the homeland, those fallen and those still alive. World information agencies report that ending in complete failure is the last chance mission, as it was figuratively christened by observers, attempted by representatives of the International Contact Group on resolving the Bosnia-Herzegovina situation. Our commentary. Overall, few expected a different outcome from the trip of international mediators to Serbia, Croatia, and Bosnia, because in the opinion of the same observers, the visit was torpedoed before its beginning, because the Yugoslavian Minister of Foreign Affairs stated in Belgrade that time for recognizing Serbia, Croatia, and Bosnia has not yet come. In the event of such a recognition, UN economic sanctions against Serbia would be significantly alleviated, but it seems that the international mediators didn't find complete understanding by Slobodan Milosevic. Nor did they achieve closer positions with the president of Croatia, Franjo Tudjman. With the Muslim leadership, they were not fated to meet at all because the Bosnian Serbs again had blockaded the Sarajevo-Butnir airport and made no exception even for the special flight of the contact group. All of this generates sad contemplation because an end to war in Bosnia as previously is not in sight. Snipers as previously are killing peaceful citizens in response from the positions of other sides. The adversaries are hailstormed by artillery fire and shells. One more noteworthy fact of late, in violation of the regime of the so-called no-fly zone, combat Muslim helicopters have appeared attacking Serb positions in central Bosnia. It seems also that such a phenomenon as an exclusive zone in which there should be no heavy weaponry again does not exist. In a word, the war is progressing and is engulfing, as of today, significantly more territory than ever before. And it's difficult to imagine that the situation could radically change. As was stated in Brussels by a European diplomat, the diplomatic means of pressuring all the sides involved in the conflict are exhausted. Europe remains paralyzed before the Balkan crisis. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Andrei Kozyrev, is in Italy. Today, his visit there ends. Away with the interim government. There are no Bolsheviks in Italy, however, but the demands are submitted by the right-centrist coalition, the Belt Liberties, which lost power in December and then agreed to a truly temporary compromise option in the face of a non-party cabinet of Lamberto Dini, so that the latter, personally and quickly, could pull the chestnuts out of the fire of economic crisis and thereby depart just as quickly. But Dini isn't leaving. His cabinet is launching tectonic efforts in order to even out the slope of the lira, untie the Gordian knot of the problem of pensions and bridle unemployment. Just yesterday, the government disbursed $7.5 billion to implement the employment program. This is the internal political entourage on the backdrop of which the meeting of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia occurred with the chairman of the Ministerial Council of Italy. Because the country which Andrei Kozyrev represents also is not free from the burden of economic and other problems, talks were on an equal footing, and histories and afflictions played no role. They discussed the state of affairs of the two-sided trade and economic ties, and of special interest to Russia, the principle of succession and consistence of Italian policy vis-à-vis our country. We discussed questions of very great mutual interest with the Prime Minister, preparations for Halifax, and I was very greatly impressed by the fact that all the Italian leaders, the President, the Prime Minister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, accept with such understanding our approach regarding the impermissibility and undesire of rash actions in the plan of broadening NATO, and that dialogue on that rash broadening within itself poisons the atmosphere in Europe. And one more time, we return to the topic of the 50th anniversary victory. Tomorrow on Poklona Hill, the State Commission will receive panoramas executed by the Greco workshop. On the entire 135 hectares of the territory, the Memorial of Victory, on all construction platforms of Poklonная Hill, work is entering its final stages. And in the main building of the complex, the Hall of Glory is almost completed. You see they're removing scaffolding from the central figure. On the walls in gold lettering are the names of all the heroes of the Soviet Union, participants of the Great Patriotic War. And tomorrow, to the judgment of the State Commission, 6 dioramas or frescoes will be presented, which in the literal sense of the word, 1 year ago was begun work at home by the artists of the Great Greco Studio. Nowhere in the world was there such a complex under one single roof. The dioramas are dedicated to the most important battles of the war, and only Leningrad will be presented to the viewers, not in the period of the breakthrough of the blockade, but during the days. Just remember, there were 900 of its heroic defense. The author of this diorama is the national artist of Russia, Yevgeny Danilevsky. December of 1941, the counterattack near Moscow. You see how leaving for the front are the Siberian divisions. Mounted regiments of Pliev move forward. The subject of this diorama has included the concrete fact of the joining of the fronts around Stalingrad. When the army of Pavlitz was surrounded, that was of 300,000 men. Completing the epic, the grandiose, multi-figure diorama of the storming of the Reichstag, we see how the first attack suffocated of the Red Banner's assault of the Reichstag, and in the thunderous clash, the direction of tanks and artillery soldiers is precisely depicted by military historians. You see the banner received by Yegorov and Kantarin. For the national artist of Russia, Benjamin Mikhailovich Sibirsky, in 300 square meters of the diorama was not enough. Currently, he's completing it, but on the adjacent walls. The 15th, the 22nd, and 29th of April in Moscow will be volunteer Saturday work days to beautify the city and prepare for the Feast of Easter and for celebrating the 50th anniversary. City administration besieges all Muscovites, all who treasure the city, to participate in the Subotniks and clean up Moscow. With this, that's all for me and the sports commentator already turned on the microphone. All the best. Good evening. April of the current year is becoming the most chess-oriented month in the world athletic calendar. Today in Riga, the memorial of Mikhail Tali started. The 8th world chess champion, the virtuoso of the art of chess, will always remain in the memories of the fans of the ancient game. 11 players, headed by the world champion Garry Kasparov, arrived for this tournament, through which it received the highest 17th category. This competition opens the Chess Super Series Riga Novgorod Zurich under the auspices of the Professional Chess Association. Today at the tournament, there was one successful game only. Vladimir Kramnik beat the Lithuanian player Kengis, and in the match of Timan Gulko, Yusupov, Elvis, Ivanchuk, Vaganyan, and Anand Short, there were ties recorded. The world champion Garry Kasparov rested in the first match, partly because Gary Kimnovich is celebrating his birthday. He's 33, the age of Christ, and the news of Channel 1 join the congratulations. During these days, there are 2 major tennis tournaments underway. If in Tokyo, where the list of seeded players is headed by the current top seed of the world, Andre Agassi, and is the strongest in the battle, in Barcelona the situation is the reverse. As you know already, out of the tournament are Pete Sampras, Sergio Bruguera, Richard Krajcik, and Andrei Medvedev. But pleasant news for Russian fans. Yevgeny Kafelnikov has entered the quarterfinals today. Good evening. Please acquaint yourselves with the weather forecast for tomorrow. The Murmansk-Arkhangelsk district and the Nenets Autonomous District in the north of the Republic of Komi will be under the influence of a lethargic cyclone, which will bring cloudy and isolated rains weather into this area with some periods of wet snow during the day, +1 to 6, in the Arkhangelsk district up to +10. In the south of Komi, it's sunny and warm and spring-like warm weather, +15 to 20. In the northwestern area, in the Baltic regions, in Belarus, in the central Volgovatsk area, in an area of heightened atmospheric pressure, it will continue to be mostly clear without precipitation during the day, +4 to 9 degrees. And in the central and Volgovatsk area, it's between +15 to 25. The same weather is expected in Ukraine, Moldova, in the central Chernozem area, and along the Volga. During the day hours here, it will be from +8 to 13 in the central Chernozem area, and along the Volga, 14 to 19. To the south of Russia, from the territory of Turkey, another cyclone is moving in. Therefore, on the lower Don, in the Krasnodar, Stavropol, Rim areas, in the republics of the Northern Caucasus, and in Georgia, partly cloudy skies are expected with some brief periods of thunderstorms with temperatures of +15 to 20. And in Armenia and Azerbaijan, without significant precipitation, +16 to 21. In St. Petersburg, partly cloudy skies without precipitation. In the morning, some fog. At night, around 0. During the day, 7 to 9 above 0. In Moscow, it will be good weather tomorrow. Mostly sunny skies, no rain at all. At night, +2 to 4 throughout the district, down to -1. And during the day, the thermometers will indicate +15 to 17. In this broadcast, we use the data of the Oceanic Meteorological Center of Russia. All the best. Goodbye.